How did you sleep? I hope that this morning finds you ready for whatever is coming up for you this week, and I'm glad you're here. Um, all right, so the epistemology of compassion and wisdom. So, epistemology is kind of the theory of how we know what we know. And in the realm of compassion and wisdom, how do we know what is a wise thing to say or do, or how do we know what a compassionate thing to say is or do? And I think that the answer lies not in the knowing how we know, it's more the what do we do what is happening when we are in the space of compassion and wisdom. And in the stanzas, going all the way back to the very beginning of The Art of Peace, in the very first couple of stanzas, it says, the second stanza actually is, one does not need money, power, or status to practice the art of peace. Heaven is right where you are standing, and that's the place to train. So the second stanza really points to this notion that the things that we imagine represent progress or goodness or awesomeness are not the things that point to the art of peace or what we need to do to be the best versions of ourselves at any moment, especially the most complex. So, buildings, money, power, status. None of that has any kind of positive role. I mean, it can. Don't get me wrong. Charity and donations, et cetera, et cetera. But having that stuff doesn't make whatever you say or do wise or compassionate. It just means you have a bunch of stuff. So point out the ego there. There's something to be said about that. So now we go from the second stanza all the way to the 105th stanza. And the 105th stanza is, construction of shrines, temples, buildings is not enough. Establish yourself as a living Buddha image. We all should be transformed into goddesses of compassion or victorious Buddhas. So, first stanza is, you don't need power, wealth, etc., etc. 105th stanza is, construction of shrines, temples, and buildings is not enough. So think about the frame of mind. The frame of mind around the construction of some kind of holy temple or something, right? So you're a devout practitioner of some particular form of kind of goodwill, and you build a statue to it. That's not what it is to practice the art of peace. It's not something that you're going to actualize by creation of a thing. Okay, so that gets to the whole idea of the epistemology of goodwill, compassion, and wisdom. And what he's saying in this context is that to get to the place of compassion and wisdom is to become accepting of things, and mostly it's becoming accepting of yourself. There are lots of ways to bypass the self and kind of put the self into a kind of a position that thinks really good. So you can imagine yourself as building a particular shrine to a particular thing or particular divinity. You can imagine that as a noble cause, right? And you could say, well, I don't have to be this or I don't have to be that because I'm doing this wonderful thing. I remember remember when I came back from Iraq, so for me, I thought I could create peace within myself by going to war. And the idea was that if I went to war and essentially created a shrine out of my service, that I could experience peace, the peace that I had not known in my life. That was my hope. And what happened was, the more I kind of built my idea of what was divine, the further I got away from the thing that creates the compassion and the wisdom itself. And the thing that creates the compassion and wisdom itself, the epistemology of compassion and wisdom, is getting out of the way of what's inside your heart. And you could say, well, what's inside my heart is just, soft tissue, blood, da, da, da. But there's also this idea that what's inside of you is bigger than you. And because it's bigger than you, you don't quite know what it is, but you do know that there's more to the human experience than yourself. So by kind of aligning with what's bigger than self, you create kind of a conduit through which kind of this expression can kind of move through you. The ego is you pushing it. Moving through you is compassion and wisdom. Now you can kind of look at that distinction as the kind of the piece. One is your kind of intellectual formulation of something. So you've created something and you get to kind of hang your hat on it. It's like, oh, I created this, I don't have to do anything else. Another is that you are the living shrine of what you believe in. And because you are a living shrine, what your life represents is a conduit, a space a space through which what you believe in becomes actualized. And then the final piece is the way you notice it, the way you can tell that you are living your belief is by what happens around you. And so there's a direct relationship between what you construct, what you create, and what is created through you. So one is you create, which is you create a shrine, or you have power and money, so that means you're this. The other is your life itself is an expression of what you believe. And so what you believe is working through you as opposed to you are using it. And so there's this surrender element, and it's not the surrender of your identity. It's not the surrender of your beingness to become, disidentified with yourself and only identified with what you believe in, only identified with God. It's a choice. So it's a recognition of your identity, and then it's the choice to allow your identity to be the conduit for what you believe in. And that's the key piece right there. That's the epistemology of compassion and wisdom, is that you're choosing. How do you know what you know? You're choosing to allow this cultivated essence of wisdom and compassion to show up through you as opposed to show up from you. And I think that's right there the significant part of the 105th stanza. Now, what gets in the way of all that is what we attempt to tame with mindfulness. And so what is always there is your ego and your body. So your ego is what your story is demanding. Your body is what your body is what your biology demands. the two together give emotional demands. And so each time you engage with first and second bell, you're assessing the demands of your story and the demands of your biology. And then third bell, you're interacting with that. And that's really unique for everyone. What I hope to have given you over the past 105 stanzas is, different tools that you can use to interact with what you see in your mind and your body. That's bell 3. But then the last part is the tapping into your best self, which is the moving, which is essentially you've tamed the mind, you've tamed the biology, you've done, well, first you notice the mind, come into present, get to the body, notice the body. Third bell is you do what you can to interact with what you see. And then fourth bell is essentially just allowing the best version of yourself to be out, to be out and expressed. And those are the 4 steps of our mindfulness practice. And that's the way the way compassion and wisdom is by how well you've participated with all the noise that is coming up from your story and your body. You can get the feel of this is the right place to be, not because you imagine or analyze what the right place to be is, but because you've gotten all the things that can kind of usurp what's going on in check. So you check the story, check the body, settled everything as best I can through practice. Now I'm ready to whoosh, put it out there. So that's where I'll stop. That's where I'll leave it there. We'll move on to the actual training itself. But just remember that what you're doing when you're taming your mind at the first bell is that you're creating first the space, because the space of this is the present moment. You're creating the space of the present moment. Once you create the present moment in your awareness, because typically your awareness is somewhere else, but once you kind of center your presence in the moment, include your biology, and then interact with what's there, you create this opening, right? You're literally creating this opening for the best version of yourself to kind of be at the forefront. It's not the best version of yourself trying to get through your body. It's not the best version of yourself trying to get through your story. It's the best version of yourself as it is. And that's the goal. That is the essence of the art of peace. And every time you practice, it gets faster. So that typically you're operating as your best self all the time. That's who you are. And then because you're present and you're aware of this, you understand and notice when the other pieces show up. So it's a shift. First, you're trying to kind of recognize the best version of yourself. Then you're sticking with the best version of yourself and recognizing when things are trying to pull. When you recognize that pull, balance it with the practice and keep coming back to the best version of yourself. So anyway, let's get to the best version of ourselves through a practice. The stories, it's cool, but let's make it the practice that really kind of takes us to the next level. All right, so follow your cues. And if you don't understand what I mean by that, your cues are what kind of give you insight into what would make you a little bit more comfortable. Like, for example, I twisted my right ankle, so I've had to readjust how I'm sitting in order to be accountable, in order to account for that twisted ankle. And so I just followed the sensation of the ankle. The ankle, if I tried one thing, the ankle didn't like it, I did something else. And so the same kind of thing applies here, but kind of globally to your whole body. Do you like the place that you're in? Do you like the seat that you're on? Is there a way to become 2 to 5% more comfortable? So do that. All right. And then we'll begin. What shows up first? sight, sound, taste, touch, or smell. What's the first thing that you notice? As I sit with what's showing up sensationally, there are three things that jump out for me. One is I've got just a piece of hair on my forehead that I feel the very tip of that piece of hair just poking into my skin. It feels like a little itch. It's very sharp. I feel it. It's tiny and sharp. And even if I shake my head, it's still there. I want to itch. So that's a little itch feeling right there. It's a touch. Another feeling I feel is the left hand is by the space heater, and the left hand I can feel the pushing in of the heat from the space heater on my left hand. Juxtaposed to that is the right hand, which I've pulled the sleeve up on the right hand, and the right hand feels the coldness of the garage, and it feels like the coldness is being pulled. The coldness is pulling on my hand. One's a push, the left's a push, the other's a pull. I also have a song going on in my head. It's the dance party song from the robot. I don't want to say the robot's name because then the robot will kick on. But the robot, so I got that going on in the back of my head, so I'm aware of that. Let's move on to second bell. So the first thing with second bell is connect to the ground. When I feel what's underneath me, I feel the vulnerability of my right foot, the right outside edge of that foot, where there's this barely broken. It's not a, I didn't break my ankle, but there's this feel in my right ankle of like if you were to take a piece of straw and start to pull a piece of straw apart, it feels like there's like the ankle has been kind of pulled apart a little bit, and it's trying to pull itself back together again. The soft tissue, not the bone, not the ligaments, but the soft tissue is trying to pull itself back together again. And any kind of pressure on that shows up as this very kind of thick feeling of light and heat. So now I move up to my pelvis. Second I move up to my pelvis, I notice a little bit of fatigue. The fatigue's in the lower back, so it's pelvis core. So pelvis feels pretty fine, pretty balanced. Come to core, there's some tension in the core. I noticed that. some lower back fatigue, just kind of holding the posture. Shallow breathing, I noticed that when I got to chest space. Breath here, although it's not the focus, the breath, a deeper breath showed up as some popping, some back popping, maybe ribs. Come up to heart space. Not much going on at heart space other than that feeling of fatigue in my lower back, just holding the posture. Throat space, just did a swallow, so felt that. Still notice that song in my head. It's further into the back of my awareness. I just noticed when I said that back, I noticed my jaw, a little pain in my jaw, right cheek. Since I talked about the song, it's louder and more towards the center of my head. Top of the head, top of the spine. As I lift, I noticed that I had dropped. I dropped a fair amount. I'd say I had dropped my alignment about 2 inches. Top of the head, top of the spine. Feel the eye coming on. Let that through. Part of the spinal alignment that I'm challenged by is that if I put too much length into my spine, the pressure on my ankle goes up. So that's part of why I was sinking a little bit. So I'll sink a little bit. I'll let my back round a little bit, lean back a little bit. Okay. So that does a little bit of a positive on the pain of my ankle. Checking smell. Okay, let's shift to third bell. So third bell is interacting with what you found, and you interact with what you found through the breath. So in a complex environment where all kinds of stuff's going on, the breath can be used as a way to bring everything back to a kind of a settled state. So if I'm fired up, I can settle down. If I'm way down, I can fire up. But what I've experienced with my taming of my mind and the going through my body is just mostly a quiet. And so what's really nice to support a quiet engagement with what is just a basic meditative practice, which is simply sitting still, no focus on anything, simply allowing the brain and allowing the mind to kind of do its thing in a quiet way. If something shows up, it just floats away. And the only thing to focus on or to give attention to is just the breath. And if I'm sitting and I notice so I'll just kind of talk you through. Okay, so I'm just going to sit for a couple minutes and I'm going to kind of talk you through what I'm experiencing. So I just come into quiet. It's almost like in the back right of my mind is that song. Dun, 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 dun. So that's way in the back. It came forward, of course, because I brought it out. So I'm sitting, just present. Not a lot going on in thoughts. Feel my body breathing. I'm noticing that the compensation for my posture, to compensate for my ankle, is causing fatigue in the lower back. So there's a balance I have to strike there. So make a little adjustment here. The aligning of my spine influenced my breath a little bit. I noticed a hold in the diaphragm, so I had to adjust that. I'll go to a full breath just to feel it through. Some images of where I'm going to go to wash my dog popped into my head, and so now the images have expanded to show kind of where I'm going to need to turn. It's interesting how fast the mind works. I'm going to re-ground into the breath. Riding the breath up and down, kind of just focusing on the experience of the breath itself, just feeling the way the inhale pulls in, the way the exhale lets out. Some flashes of color. I got some light blue. There's a falling in deeper. There's kind of a deeper quiet. There was a kind of a flash to a deeper meditation, getting more still, reminded me of the feelings that I've gotten before in meditation. So that was a clear indicator of the path into greater and greater stillness. But I'm going to resist that a little bit because I'm going to go into fourth bell to finish up. So I'm going to go to prayer pose, hand placement, and just start thinking gratitude and compassion, gratitude and compassion, gratitude and compassion. The first thing that popped into my head was a guy named Andy McCaffrey standing in front of the firehouse with his wife Karen and some of the other firemen. Andy had taken up, I think he took some just breakfast to firehouse. So two things. First, gratitude for Andy. He's he was such a good dude, such a disaster, such a warrior, such a shame. It's full of so much light, full of so much hate. I just, in my mind, I see the kind of the whirlwind of who he is and was, and just glad I got to know him. So now the red of the fire engine house shifts my attention to first responders. Just compassion for first responders. I just can't imagine how tricky things are right now. I mean, actually I can. I know exactly what it's like to go out into the field to a situation that could be really difficult. Just going into the field itself is difficult. Viruses everywhere. So I feel for your minds. I understand your minds. I hope that there's some peace of mind that you can have at some point. I hope you've got good protective equipment, good standard operating procedures. Hope you've got good leaders. I hope you find a little bit of luck today. I hope people are kind today. And in my mind, I just heard, that's it. That's enough. And so from there, I'm going to make a conscious ending. So I'm going to take 2 breaths, and on the second breath, I'll end the practice. And kind of watch the breath. So when I took that deep breath, I noticed a lot of the ribs, the back ribs. I heard a lot of movement there. Last one. And I'll slowly come back into focus. And then acknowledge the room to finish up. Oh, now I'm going to be mindful of my ankle. And that will be the practice for the day. So I'll just go over what to expect over this week and next, because it's the final. This is the final 2 weeks of the Art of Peace practice. This is my 3rd one, so it's gotten interesting. My plan is to do this once a year. So for once a year, I'll spend 23 weeks going over the Art of Peace. So today was 105. Construction of shrine and temple buildings is not enough. Establish yourself as a living Buddha image. We all should be transformed into goddesses of compassion and victorious Buddhas. Yeah, tomorrow is a good one. So tomorrow, yeah, we're talking a lot about divinity. So there's a lot of religious God talk coming up. So I'll do my best to keep that as kind of neutral and accessible as possible. So bear with me. That's really it. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for participating in this Art of Peace practice. It's a joy to teach, and it's a pleasure to know that people are watching and participating with me. So thank you. I hope you have a great rest of your Monday. Let's go Washington football team. We got a big game this afternoon. If the freaking Giants can beat the Seattle Seahawks and the football team can beat the Steelers, I mean, jeez. So go Washington. All right. Later on, we're down.